Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Petteri Kivimäki. I'm the CTO of Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, NIIS for short. And let's wait for a few seconds so that we can have my slides. There they are. So first, a few words about NIIS, and then let's dive into the data spaces in more detail. So NIIS is a non-profit association established in 2017, which mission is to develop digital government solutions to its members. Currently, NIIS has 3 members, Finland, Estonia and Iceland. And NIIS has 2 main products, X-Road and Harmony e-delivery access. They are both open source products for a secure data exchange between organizations. And I have given a couple of presentations regarding X-Road here during the previous years, but today I'm not going to dive into X-Road or Harmony in more detail. But the main reason why I am giving this presentation here today is that we are transforming X-Road into a data space technology, and for that reason I have needed to study the data space concept quite much myself during the recent years, and during that time I have realized that it's initially quite difficult concept to get in, and hopefully this presentation will help you to understand it a little bit better. But to start with, by looking some of the data exchange technologies that have been used very widely during the last decades. So these technologies are not going anywhere when the data space concept is coming. It's rather the other way around. These are going to be used together with data spaces. So the data space concept will provide a new way to use these together. And also one observation, the things that I have listed here, they are not only technologies, there are also solutions and regulations. So a little bit of like comparing apples, oranges and bananas, but they are all somehow related to data spaces. That is the common factor. But the data space concept is not only about technologies, it's more widely about interoperability. The European Interoperability Framework defines 4 layers of interoperability: legal, organizational, semantical and technical. And the data space concept is related to all these layers. But what is a data space? Currently, there are multiple ongoing projects and initiatives, and they all have their own description. What is a data space? Here you can see a couple of them. I'd say that the common elements between the different descriptions are interoperability, ecosystem, and common or shared rules. So to simplify the description, the data space concept is, first of all, supporting multiple use cases. So it's not for any specific business domain or use case, it's generic. Then it's based on a distributed architecture, it's governed by a governance framework, it enables trusted data transactions, and it also enables data sovereignty. At the same time, it's not a data lake, a data warehouse, a new data exchange protocol, only a data platform, or only a technical solution to exchange data. If we look at the evolution of data exchange over the years, first we had bilateral data exchange in one-to-one manner, then closed community data sharing, and in both these approaches, the common factor is that the data exchange parties, they knew each other and they were trusting each other. But then nowadays we have moved towards decentralized ecosystems where data is exchanged many-to-many manner, and it's quite common that the data exchange parties, they don't know each other and they don't trust each other. And that's of course a challenge because data exchange, it's based on trust. So we have an existing data exchange or data ecosystem with multiple organizations, multiple parties. Then a group of organizations, they want to have a more well-defined framework for the data exchange within the ecosystem. So they decide to kick off a data space initiative. First, of course, they need to have some business case, because otherwise, well, why would you like to build something if you don't have a business case for it? So that's kind of the very first thing that you need to have. But then they probably want to define roles for the organizations who are participating, then common rules and policies for the data exchange, standards that are followed when implementing the data exchange on a technical level, and other similar details. And all these things that are defined, they form the governance framework of the data space. So basically a document that defines all the different aspects of the data space. And then to make that data space operational, then all those things that are defined in the governance framework, they of course need to be implemented, they need to be operationalized. And in an operational data space, there is a governance authority that owns the governance framework and is responsible for maintaining it. Then, of course, there are participants that can be data consumers or data providers who exchange data with each other. And technical infrastructure is, of course, required to implement actually the data exchange, and the infrastructure should be aligned with the technical specifications that are defined in the governance framework. And eventually, also other organizations who were not part of the initial data space initiative usually are able to join the data space. But that all depends on the governance framework. In some cases, the data space can be a very closed circle, while in other cases it can be more public. It really depends on the business case. But besides the participants and governance authority roles, there are also other roles in the data space. So operator, it's a specific type of participant that provides data space enabling services to other participants. So for example, a service catalog, monitoring services or audit services. And then trust service provider or trust service providers are also needed. So they validate and verify that the participants are conformant to the data space rules and policies, and based on the verification issue credentials to the participants that the participants can then use to prove that, hey, we are verified members of this data space, and that's how trust is established between the participants. There are also different kind of governance models. Centralized governance model means that there is one governance authority responsible for the governance. The implementation itself, it's still distributed, so this is only centralized in a governance sense. Then the governance model can be federated, so there can be more than one governance authority, or it could be completely decentralized. For example, it could be based on some smart contract running on blockchain. And when starting to build a new data space, there are multiple building blocks available. And the building blocks, they are divided into two main categories. So business and organizational building blocks and technical building blocks. So as you can see, the business and organizational building blocks, they are concentrated more, if we think about the levels of interoperability, more on the legal and organizational level, while the technical building blocks, they are concentrating on the semantical and technical levels. This is a more technical view to the data space concept. The main idea is that organizations, they are never connecting their information systems directly, but information systems, services and APIs, they are always connected through standardized access points. And in this model, the standardized access point is called a participant agent or a data space connector. And the data space connector implements a set of standardized features, meaning that the participants, they don't need to implement them by themselves every time. It's enough to deploy the data space connector, taking care of things like authentication, monitoring, logging, applying access and usage policies, and so on. But then the architecture also has other components, so-called enabling services, like, for example, the catalog, data space, register, and so on. And those components, their names, they are not standardized yet. So if you see diagrams, architecture diagrams related to data spaces, they can have different names because different projects and initiatives have named them a little bit differently. Hopefully, in the near future, we have more standardized names for them. And this is how the data space protocol stack looks like. So when data is exchanged between two data exchange participants, the data always flows directly between the data space connectors. And the data space connector protocol stack looks like this. It has three layers: trust plane, control plane, and data plane. The trust plane is about identity management and trust, while the control plane is about service discovery and contract negotiation. Data plane is about data exchange. The control plane and data plane, they are standardized, and it guarantees interoperability between different data spaces and different data space connectors. Instead, on the data plane level, existing specifications, protocols, and products are used. So like I mentioned before, the data space concept is not a new data exchange protocol, but it rather provides a way how we can utilize existing APIs, protocols, products in a trusted environment. And the trust is provided by the trust plane. On the control plane level, we have a shared way to define a way to discover services and also define access and usage policies. But then on the data plane level, we can reuse the tools that we already have. And of course, interoperability is based on standardization. We have several different kind of standards. We have European standards, international standards, then we have ICT technical specifications and open source specifications. Some of these are data space specific, while others are generic, common ICT specifications, like, for example, decentralized identifiers and open digital rights language. They are not directly related to data spaces, but they are being utilized in the implementation. Also, some of the standards are already existing and being used, while others are new and are just being defined. So here is a little bit different aspect from the regulatory point of view and how it affects to the data space concept. So of course every continent, every country, it has its own regulations that are affecting the data space concept and, well, almost everything that we do. In the European Union, we have some specific regulations that affect the data spaces, but more about them in a minute. First, let's look at the organizations that are currently working on data spaces. So on the green background, we have the most well-known organizations currently working with the data space concept. So they are all non-profit associations with international companies as members. So IDSA, International Data Spaces Association, GaiaX, Fireware, and Big Data Value Creation. They are all working on different areas of data spaces. So they are working with things like reference architectures, specifications, and so on. So they all have their own specific areas where they work on, but they also have a lot in common. So things that they are working on are overlapping, and for that purpose to kind of coordinate the work to find technical convergence, we have the Data Space Business Alliance. When it comes to the specifications that are being defined, in general, specifications and standards are not very useful if we don't have, if they are not adopted, we don't have implementations for them, and therefore it's very important to also have projects that are working on the implementation level, and the yellow boxes here, they are projects and organizations working on the implementation of the specifications. So about the regulatory foundation in Europe, there are several regulations that affect the data space concept. Some of them are very generic, like the GDPR and eIDAS, and some others like Data Governance Act and Data Act. Well, they are not data space specific, but they have some details that directly reference to data spaces. So everything basically derives from the European Strategy for Data, which is operationalized by the Data Governance Act and Data Act. Then there are different kind of bodies that support the implementation of the common European data spaces. And the common European data spaces, they are basically 14 strategically important areas where the European Union wants to have a data space developed around them. And that's why they are supporting the implementation in different ways. But besides the common European data spaces, there are also plenty of other ongoing data space initiatives. According to the data space radar maintained by the International Data Spaces Association, there are almost 150 ongoing data space initiatives globally on different sectors and domains. So it's important to make a separation between the data space initiatives that are working on the building blocks and specifications. Then we have the data space projects working on common European data spaces, and then data space projects working on other data spaces. So some of the projects are working on the specifications and building blocks, while others are working on the implementation. And of course, the number of projects working on the implementation, it's a lot higher compared to the ones that are working with the specifications. And And to conclude my presentation, interoperability, it's not only about technology, but also legal, organizational, and semantic aspects. They must be considered too. At the moment, it seems that data spaces will play a very important role in cross-border and cross-sector data exchange in the near future. But at the same time, they will not be the only game in town. So other technologies and ways to exchange data will exist too. And technical convergence between the different initiatives working on the specifications is extremely important because after all, the goal of the data space initiative or data space concept is to improve the interoperability when it comes to exchanging data between organizations. So, thank you for listening.